Welcome to The Point. Today we have with us Dr. Mashelkar, who needs no introduction to India. Dr. Mashelkar, good to have you with us.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Indian science had a huge investment, particularly starting with the Nehruvian period, even after. Why is it that we don't seem to have delivered, at least in public eye, what we thought was promised by Indian science?
Well, I would say that science has two components. One is excellence. You win Nobel Prizes, you become fellow of Royal Society, get elected to academies, you publish in top scientific journals. That is one part of it. That is doing India proud. The other one is relevance. The science that we do, does it make a difference to Indian people at large? And I would say, considering the investment that have been made, Indian science has delivered. You look at the investments. At a point in time when I wanted to defend Indian science, while I was in Delhi, I used to say that the total investments in Indian science are less than the R&D budget of, let's say, a multinational company working in drug research or a General Electric. And for that, we have designed, developed, launched our own satellites, entire nuclear energy program where we were denied technology by the Western world, we have developed on their own. You look at agriculture and several other areas where we have made a difference. So I think if you consider the value that we have created to the cost that we have incurred, we have done a lot. Could we have done better? Yes, there is no question about that.
You know, that brings me to the question of cost. India spends about 0.37% of its GDP on higher education. Out of that, a part of it, of course, goes to science. A major part of that goes to technology and medical areas, not to really core science. Do you think this is adequate, or do you think we need to really step up the scientific budget?
Not at all. It has to be raised very significantly. You know, I have a simple equation. Just like E equal to mc square was Einstein's famous relativity equation, we consider that to be one of the most powerful equations. My most powerful equation is E equal to F. What is E? Education. What is F? Future. Education is our future. No education, no future for the country. In the same way, science is our future. Because if you consider the challenges that India had, there have to be India-specific solutions. Tuberculosis, malaria, filaria are not the rest of the world's problem. They are India's problems. And the scientific solutions to create, for example, a drug for a resistant tubercular challenge is India's challenge. And therefore, science is also our future, because science impacts health, science impacts everything that we do. So the investments in this, education as well as science, are investments into the future.
If we look at this, we will see that Indian investments in science education is thinly spread, while a few institutions really get at least some kind of critical funding. Now, do you think we need to broaden the base more? Do you think we need to create more this kind of critical institutions? Do you think we should really do good quality science in a few places, or should we really do it, spread it much more widely than it is now?
I would say the challenge for India is straddling the pyramid. Let me explain. We have institutions at the top, which are IITs, and we have institutions at the bottom, which are ITIs, the training institutions, industrial training institutions, right? So from IITs, you move on to the next one, which are regional engineering colleges, government engineering colleges. I'm talking about technical education. We talk about polytechnics and so on and so forth. Now, we cannot say we will think, be proud of, and invest only in IITs. Across the pyramid, we have to sort of work. I'll give you an instance. In 1998, the government had set up a committee to look at regional engineering colleges, 19 of them. I was the chairman. That Mashelkar committee report of 1998 got fully implemented. What was that report saying? I looked at the young students who go to regional engineering colleges. You know, 200,000 students used to appear, 2,000 used to get in IITs. But for those 2,000, there were 20,000 as good. And where would they go? To RECs. And what were they doing? Whereas bulk of the top cream of IIT was leaving the country. Out of those 2,000, they were the ones who were actually serving the country in space, in defense, in atomic energy, in engineering, for industry, and so on and so forth. So I said, why don't we make these into national institutes of technology? Existing institutions, not creating new ones. And the government actually has done it. And we have now close to 30 national institutes of technology. I think the challenge, responding to your question, is that we must straddle the entire pyramid, lift the quality, the level of excellence, and the governance, so as to say, and things will happen.
Dr. Mashelkar, the reality is that bulk of the engineering institutes in the country today produce graduates who have to be given virtually remedial education in industry. A section of that are not employable. Now that is an unfortunate problem. Do you think we have created too many engineering institutions, been very poor in its quality in trying to select what should be the minimum level before you can give them the ability to give degrees?
Absolutely. I think what has happened is that there has been a sudden expansion based on the kind of demand that we had. We have responded to the demand. But I think a time has come when we start looking at quality very seriously. Because the product of education is a graduate who finally serves the society, who gets into industry and works for the nation. If that product is not good enough, then you are creating a national crime by sort of not doing proper remedial, taking proper remedial measures to ensure certain minimum quality. And that is where accreditation becomes important, standard setting becomes important. That is where the government has to set up, let's say, tough measures, so as to say.
Now the problem is that a lot of this is also, as we know, open to what is called corruption today, has accredited institutions which are not worthy of being accredited, and this whole thing has now got into a situation where the students have invested money into their future and there is no future.
Yes.
Do you think that we are taking harsh measures, or we think that we should take harsh measures?
No, it is a serious issue, and I think the present government I have seen is taking those harsh measures. For example, there is a committee under Prakash Tandon where people like Gordon Mehta and others are involved, which are actually looking at those institutions, grading them, for example, all right, changing their governance structures completely, including their boards, by the way, which are kind of family managed, etc. This is happening as we speak.
But it's still a huge number of students are suffering the consequence of
That's
this.
the past. I think I'm looking at the future. And your question was, are we doing something about it? My answer is that yes,
we are trying to do
steps.
something
Yes.
about it. Now coming back to the other issue which has been plaguing science education particularly, that a lot of the products who go, it appears, to science education are really preparing or marking time either for engineering or for administrative services. We are not getting the next generation of science educators because we are not producing enough science graduates. Do you think this is going to become a serious problem?
This is a very important question because once again, there must be demand on science. By whom? By the industrial enterprises, by the society. Okay? Is this demand changing? I would say yes. For example, if you look at research and development and break it up into components, the one that is done in public sector, like the government institutions, national laboratories like CSIR and ICR, ICMR, etc., versus that done in industry, you found the ratio was 80 to 20, 80% to 20%, government to industry. If you look at the advanced nations, those ratios are practically reverse. Okay? Why is that so? Why is it that industry did not go for science-led innovation? Well, you do innovation when there is a demand on innovation in the marketplace. Pre-1991, for example, when we were not liberalized, when we were not open, all that we did was reverse engineering. All that we did was copying. You know, copying does not require very high level of science. Post-1991, in terms of competition, when we got opened up to the whole world, you see the change that is taking place. The same drugs companies, for example, were just copying the molecules as soon as they appeared in the US. Within 18 months, we would put a copy here. And it was perfectly legitimate, by the way. because we had only process patterns, not product patterns. So it was perfectly legal. There is a different level of science that was required, you know, process chemistry and process engineering, so that you could copy. But what has happened now is that because that cover has gone, the patent laws have changed. 1/1/2005 onwards, we are TRIPS compliant. That means the license to copy has gone. You see the significant increase by the industry now in science-based innovation. I was talking to a leader of an industrial R&D on the other day in pharma area, and they are looking for hundreds of structural biologists, system biologists, pharmacologists, etc., which they were not looking at, let's say, 10 years ago. So there is a demand, so as to say, of quality scientists that is coming up. My personal belief is that as we move towards science-led innovation, as we understand that technology gets created from science, but it is the application of technology through the process of innovation which creates wealth, which creates social good, and we create that link between science, technology and innovation, you will find there will be more and more demand on this.
Dr. Mashelkar, your argument is that it's really market driven in this particular case.
Partly.
If effectively, we had a market for process patents earlier, so we basically copied molecules, and that was the demand at that time. But we really also talk of different epochs. If we really took a look at it at that time, that's a different kind of a period that we had. Now, I really don't see a large demand, for instance, for physicists. I do not see a large demand for chemists. Maybe for, you know, pharmaceutical companies may have some demands. Where do you think we are going to get the primary school teachers, the secondary school teachers to sustain our education system?
Yes.
If there is no demand? Is that only to be done by private corporations trying to do science innovation, or is there something we have to do for the education system?
I think my response was in the following sense. I said it's not just the supply that works, it's the demand that works. And how do you create more and more demand? That was the point I was trying to make. Government had always the demand, there is no question, otherwise they would not have invested in public sector R&D in the way that they did. And successive prime ministers did that, I mean, irrespective of which party they came on. I must say, I feel proud that that was basically the case. As far as the demand is concerned, I mean, if you look at the chemical industry, since you mentioned chemistry, I was the director of National Chemical Laboratory, so I know a bit about chemistry and chemical demand. There is a huge demand on chemists, quality chemists, there is no question. And don't forget that when we put something like a green revolution at the front end and call it a success, at the back end, if we had not produced the pesticides, the insecticides, we would not have done it. And 70% of the agrochemicals that were produced, by the way, were from CSR system, publicly funded.
We'll come back after a break.
Same thing I can say.
Dr. Mashelkar will just come back after a short break. Welcome back to The Point. We are talking to Dr. Mashelkar, discussing Indian science. Dr. Mashelkar, you were saying that there is a demand for various kinds of scientific people which is being produced by Indian science. My question was that if you look at the demand that is there from the secondary school system to the primary school system, are you producing enough for that? And will we not lose our future if the school system collapses because we don't have scientific graduates?
Absolutely, you are on the dot. In fact, my greatest concern, if you ask me, is about the teachers, both in quantity as well as quality. Frankly, I look at it as a major crisis that we have. Okay? Now, the challenge is, how do you make teaching as a profession which is not only noble, but as one which is psychologically rewarding for people? I mean, I am a beneficiary of having made such teachers. You know, I remember my Indian Science Congress presidential talk, which was on child-centered education, woman-centered family, human-centered development, knowledge-centered society, and innovation-centered India. That was the new Panchashil for the new millennium. And in the child-centered education, I had talked about Principal Bhave, my teacher, by the way. And I want to take 2 minutes just to illustrate what I mean and how we can produce more Bhaves. You know, I was born in a very poor family. In fact, I walked barefoot until I was 12, studied under street lights practically. Didn't go to a rich school, went to a poor school, but that poor school had rich teachers like Principal Bhave. And what he did, because many times we say resource is a constraint, etc. No. Principal Bhave believed in showing us the nature, learning from the nature, doing things with the limited amount of money that we had. And one of the experiments that he did was incredible. You know, he had, he wanted to show us how to find the focal length of a convex lens. He took us out into the sun, moved that convex lens up and down. There is a bright spot, and he said, this is the focal length. And then he held it for some time, the paper burned. When the paper burned, he turned to me for some reason and said, Mashelkar, like this, if you can focus, you can achieve anything in the world. That did two things for me. I said, science is fantastic, it's so powerful, I must become a scientist that day. And second, gave me philosophy of life. Focus, and you can achieve anything in life. I mentioned that in my speech, and I remember later we had a lunch. Mr. Atal Bihari Vajpayee was then the Prime Minister, was sitting next to me. And the discussion, because there were a couple of Nobel laureates also, they said, we also don't have teachers like Bhave anymore. And I still remember Atalji turning to me and saying, Mashelkar ji, आपको पता है आजकल ऐसे भावे सर जैसे टीचर क्यों नहीं होते? क्योंकि आज समाज में प्रतिष्ठा नहीं है उनको. They don't have prestige. And therefore, I think it's a fundamental issue. Basically, there is no use just saying Guru Dev or Guru Brahma. You know?
See, you have to give respect to teachers,
exactly.
to the teaching community, to feel, yes, this is a profession we should spend our lives in. But if we don't do that, we have no future for Indian
Absolutely,
science.
I agree. I agree. That's why I said education is equal to future, and that future will be created by teachers.
You had also raised the issue about learning from nature, learning through discovery, which is what the buzzword today in science education is. But there is a different threat coming, which is to think that computers, internet, other what is called instrumentality-based education, that you can have produced some PowerPoints and that will do the teaching. Aren't we also moving the shift away from teachers to some things which are external?
Well, I would put it this way. There is a paradigm shift in learning that is going to come. Digital learning is going to become the way of life. Basically, it will be no substitute for my Bhave sir. I know that. But the two will go together. I'll give you an instance. There's a book by Clayton Christensen which has just come. You know, he's a great thought leader from Harvard University, which talks about innovative university and how digital learning is going to change the way. Because see, what's going to happen now? Anytime, anyone, anywhere. Data, voice, video, and ubiquitous broadband are becoming reality. Now, when that happens, the way you learn is going to change entirely. Okay? If you have looked at Khan Academy, for example, you will find through digital learning, basically, and the interactive learning, practically you can get hold of any complex subject and learn it up there. I think it's a question of how do you make use of it. You know, I think finally the tool that is given in your hand, you can use it any way you like. You know, Mrs. Gandhi, when she was assassinated, the guards who were supposed to guard her were given a rifle to guard her, right? That was the function, the objective. They didn't do that. They killed it. It's the same thing about any other tool, whether it is phosgene, which is used to create, let's say, a good pesticide, or phosgene which is used to kill people, basically. So it all depends upon us.
Dr. Mashelkar, what you're saying is digital learning should not be used to kill the teacher, but to help him and enhance him.
Exactly.
That is the task.
Exactly, because the way it will help him is like this. You know, I went through this Khan Academy exercise. I'm trained as a chemical engineering scientist, so I went through industrial chemistry and saw stoichiometry and saw the way they're teaching. Within 18 minutes, I can tell you, my concepts were totally clear. 18 minutes. So what is going to happen now? When the students, and these are all available on YouTube, free by the way, 2,000 such videos. So what is going to happen is that, supposing I have industrial stoichiometry class tomorrow, I would have learned all the concept by spending that 18 minutes. So when I go to the class, I'm smarter than the teacher as far as the concept is concerned. What are you going to teach me? So the challenge for the teacher now is to innovate so that in a class, he moves in a completely different way. The interactive learning, case studies, and other things become sort of more important. So what is going to happen is that there is going to be a paradigm shift where this physical learning and digital learning are going to complement each other in the most innovative way. In fact, this is India's opportunity, by the way, to create what I call as not best practices in learning, but the next practices in learning.
Dr. Mashelkar, that's an interesting issue. It can also create a digital divide, because if you don't have electricity 18 hours a day in the rural areas, how are you going to provide access of digital learning to the schools? So, you really bring up much larger social questions.
Absolutely. Inclusive society is something that is close to our heart. We talk about inclusive growth, inclusive society. And that inclusion means access despite income inequality. Now that looks like a paradox, isn't it? But that is not true anymore because the way the word is changing. On the other day, I was driving from Pune to Bombay and I saw two people waiting at the crossing for the green lights to come, traffic lights. Interestingly, one of them was an extraordinary rich lady, I could sense that by looking at her, and the other one was a girl from the slum in tattered clothes, maybe 6 or 7 year old. Income inequality is huge. Access equality, you know what? Both of them are on their mobiles. Access to communication. Despite income inequality, they have created access equality. It's the same thing in education, basically. 1st October last year, American Academy of Arts and Science, which was established in 1780, honored the new fellows of the academy. From 1780, only 7 fellows have been honored. The 6th and 7th signed in the book on that day. You know who was 6th? Ratan Tata. You know who was 7th? Me. It's a paradox. Because in 1960, when I finished my SSC, my poor mother could not afford education. I was going to leave education. Tata's gave me a 60 rupees per month scholarship. In 1960, if somebody had told me that 50 years down the line, you and he will sign in the same book, I would not have believed it on the same day. You know, how did that happen? Access equality, despite the income inequality that we had. So access to education, access to health, access to communication is bound to happen the way the sort of costs are coming down. I mean, the Akash tablet that has been launched, $35, for example, of course, jury is still out on that. That's a different matter. But supposing we make it a reality, the dream of 1 tablet per child can be made a reality. Not when it was $2,000.
Problem, Dr. Mashelkar, is even providing 1 tablet per child may become a reality, but providing electricity to the villages and providing electricity to the schools may not become a reality, and that's a problem that
I'm not sure.
I think we are going to face.
I'm not sure. Don't forget that India is not static. India is dynamic. India is changing. We have moved from $500 to $1,500 GDP per capita. We have the capacity to move to 5,000, 10,000, 15,000, 20,000. We need to accelerate the pace of this inclusive growth. And that is why, you know, my heart sinks when I see 5.1% growth. Why am I hankering for 8% and 10% and double-digit growth? It is because of that. It is that which will allow us to invest more and more into infrastructure, like the roads, for example, that we are seeing. The same Pune-Bombay, which I used to do in 6 hours, I do it in 2 hours, sometimes in 1.5 hours. All right? These are the investments that are basically coming up. So I think investments into building the new physical infrastructure, the investment into building the new intellectual infrastructure will become more and more as we move up the economic curve.
So you do not think that it is going to become a more divided world in terms of access to education, access to health? You believe that it will actually provide a more equitable access?
Absolutely, and for that we need to be innovative. For that we need to be innovative. Like, for example, you are worried today, and we are worried today, about there being no light in a hut. And therefore, the children studying in kerosene, under kerosene lamp, right? Or not studying at all because there is darkness. I have someone, Ashish Gowde, who was working for Ford Motors, mid-30s. He left and came here. He said, I want to serve my India. Well, how? Serving my villages. How? By making sure that there is a light in every house. What did he do? Pedal-driven systems for creating LED-based lighting systems. You do pedaling for 4 minutes and you have 4 hours of light. And that is getting now sort of scaled up. So there is a solution that this young man has found to solve precisely the problem that we are talking about. We need more and more what I call as inclusive innovations of this kind to make the new equitable India possible.
Thank you, Dr. Mashelkar. It's been great having you with us.
Thank you very much.
This is all the time we have today. See you next time with a new guest. Till then, keep watching Rajya Sabha TV.